Traditional Jamaican ska was very much informed by jazz music. But in the 90s, New York musician Fred Reiter, aka Rocksteady Freddie, coined the term ska jazz and formed the group the New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble. How does ska jazz differ from traditional ska? Fred answers this question, and he tells us plenty of stories about his time with the Toasters, the Scofflaws, the New York Citizens, and of course, the New York Jazz Ska Ensemble, who are still going strong to this day.
Aaron, do you like jazz?
Sure, yeah.
I don't like jazz.
Oh, damn.
But you know what? Sprinkle some ska in there. I'll listen to it.
All right. You like ska jazz.
Yeah. My niece, her dad really likes jazz. And she told us that she doesn't like man jazz. She only likes lady jazz.
What's man jazz?
Man jazz is just all the weird angular stuff that's out there. All the like deep stuff. Lady jazz is Ella Fitzgerald.
She's got good taste.
Yeah, for sure.
First thing I wanted to ask you about, Fred, was there's footage of a tour in Europe in like 1998 with like Laurel Aitken singing. I know there's like also interview with Rico Rodriguez, Greg Lee as well, and you're in this band. So I'm curious what all this exactly is.
What that was I mean, the whole video and the whole thing out of it, I'm not exactly sure how that came from it, but we were on tour with Laurel Aitken. We were doing like a co-headline thing with him. We did a month with him in the States and then a month in Europe. So that's what that footage is from.
So the New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble played a set, and then the band also backed him as well?
Exactly. We did a set, and then we would take a small break, and then he would come out, and then we would do his set. And we did about a month in Europe, and we did a month in the States.
You guys had to play 2 sets. I wonder how long you were on stage each night.
I mean, it's a long time ago. I mean, dude, in the end, if the spirit of Jah hits, we'll keep playing and playing and playing. So, it was always a good night. We wanted to party. We wanted the people to be happy, so, it was always fun, but like, who didn't used to sweat at a ska show after it was over? So,
What was that like to play to back an icon like that?
It was really fun. I mean, he was a little older, so like we had to kind of try to really take care of him and make sure everything was cool. And it was just great to connect to it, to connect to the history and hang with him. And it was like culture shock for all of us. And it was just it was really a lot of fun and playing like some of the old standards. It was great to like really, get inside those and really relearn them and get to perform them with him. Yeah, it was an honor.
So I want to talk about the philosophy or the concept behind ska jazz. You coined this term, but ska and jazz are interconnected. Traditional ska is very jazz influenced music.
Sure.
Do you want to explain what the difference between traditional ska and ska jazz as you coined it and as you play it?
Well, I did this with Rick Faulkner. We were playing in the Toasters. We were on tour with the Scatolites. It was around 1993, 1994. We did a couple of real big ones. And, we were, with the Special Beat and the Toasters and a couple of other really big bands. And we were amazed that these old Jamaican cats, would rock the house every night. So we were really inspired by it. But of course, we wanted to do our own thing and kind of take it, from our own perspective. So, of course, Jamaican jazz was influenced by, blues and all kinds of stuff. But what we did with the ska jazz was kind of get into a couple different concepts. One was we were going to extend the harmony. So a lot of what those guys were doing was very basic harmony. We were going to add extended harmony, like real jazz harmony. And then other elements that we kind of brought to the table were some of the really fast stuff that I like to do kind of has a punk element to it.
Mhm.
And then the other point that I kind of really liked, which might be somewhat in sync with them, but I really kind of wanted to get to this. It was like, like especially across the states, across the world, there are all these like band geek kind of people that play their horns and stuff, and like they want to be in the rock band too. And so, like in the 40s in the States, like instrumental music was pop music. So part of like what I wanted to do with the ska jazz is make it more of like a popular form.
I see. Let's break this down a little bit more. For someone who doesn't necessarily isn't super familiar with jazz or doesn't know the language of jazz, can you explain what those harmonies are that you're drawing upon?
Well, I mean, I could really break it down to like, there are 12 tones in music and you can have major scales and major sounds. And, that's based on like the first, third, and fifth of the major scale. A minor is the first flat, third, and fifth. I don't know if that's completely a foreign concept to you, but like with more jazzier harmonies, you're extending it. You're going to the seventh, the ninth, the 11th, more dissonance, just a little bit more grittier kind of sounds. A lot of the island sounds were just very basic major and minor sounds. A lot of the reggae sound harmony is not really extended. Like you don't find a sharp 11 or a flat 13 typically, whereas like we were kind of bringing that to the table, really trying to put modern jazz over the ska beat.
So a lot of these extended harmonies, were they present in older jazz, the jazz that influenced Scotalites, or was this how it developed over time?
I mean, that harmony's always sort of been there. I think Scatolites were more influenced by blues and jump, and not so much by. I mean, the real. I mean, Roland and Tommy played jazz. They listened to Coltrane, and they did all kinds of shit. So, I mean, it's all sort of interconnected, but they didn't really bring that harmony into their music. They kind of kept more with a more island, more major or minor sound, a basic harmony, like, just like three tones in the chord, as opposed to maybe 5 or 6 or 7.
Hmm. I see. Okay. Yeah. I mean, a lot of what their influences too, like you said, blues and jump and stuff is like, and like New Orleans or New Orleans music, R&B and stuff like that, which definitely not pulling from those kinds of like harmonies and chords, generally speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little more basic. That's all. I mean, we kind of got into like, and we also were interested in highlighting, seminal jazz composers at the beginning, like Mingus and Monk and Miles Davis, and actually, kind of treating their songs with the ska beat.
You talked about playing fast songs. You said kind of a punk element, but like how much of it was influenced by sort of the big band era? Because a lot of that was pretty fast too.
Well, the big band era, in the sense of, for sure, yeah, you had like, kind of jump bluesy kind of feels and up stuff, but also just for sure the fact that it was the dance music of the time. It was the popular music of the time. I mean, back in the 40s and 50s, that's what people did. They would go out and they would listen to the big band and dance. And it was instrumental music. That was popular music. So, part of what like I kind of come back to is like, hey, if it could be popular music then, why can't it be popular music now?
Yeah, it's kind of an era of jazz that's like you said, it's popular. A lot of jazz is more esoteric, a little bit more small clubs where people are sitting and watching.
And just listening. Whereas, like, also the ska jazz, and where I'm coming from, is like we're a dance band. So
Mhm.
even though we're playing this like jazzy influenced music, I'm kind of happiest when everyone's dancing.
Hmm. In the 90s, when you guys first started, and there was like the third wave ska boom thing happening, and then there was also the swing thing happening. Did you guys ever get sort of lumped in with that swing side, or did you ever play shows with those bands?
Yeah, we did. We definitely played like Big Voodoo Daddy and a couple of those guys. I think we did a couple shows with them. And, it's funny how, like, it was like almost like a fad, it was like this popular thing, but it didn't last that long. But, you know, um, uh, it was cool though, because, it was bringing back again some of this old school big bandy swing stuff. I think of, Joe Jackson's album, which one, the one he did with horns. Like
Yeah.
that was really good in that vibe.
Did you feel like there was a difference in the crowds? Obviously a lot of the ska crowd, they were coming at it through like punk ska, but a lot of those crowds were looking back and understanding the roots. And the music wasn't, even though it was sort of framed as a fad, it wasn't a fad the way that the swing revival was. And the swing revival actually was a lot bigger from what I remember. Like there was like dance classes and all kinds of stuff. So I wonder, did you feel more of a more engaged audience that knew more about the music when it was ska or swing, or did it always vary?
It always varied. And like, it also comes down to also like sort of what you were saying too. It's like, we weren't really playing in little clubs where they're just sitting there and, ready to listen at a table. We're playing in places where people are dancing and hanging out. And so like in the end, ultimately for me, it's more about like, are they enjoying it? Do they like it? Music, could be enjoyed at so many levels. And obviously musicians like, more, I don't want to say complicated music, but maybe I don't even know how to put it in the positive term, but in the sense of like, in the end, it doesn't matter. Everyone's a listener, and either they like it or they don't, and either they think it's cool or not. So, I think it's great when some of the older figures or that the element where people really understand, damn, these musicians really had to work to be able to play like this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like when they understand that's a great thing, because today it seems like it's not always like that, in the sense of, there's more instant gratification as opposed to like playing an instrument for like 30 or 40 years. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, becoming a master at your one specific instrument.
Yeah. So
I want to talk a little bit about your recording process, because I've seen interviews where you talk about the fact that you prefer to record as much as you can live and to do as little overdubbing as possible.
yeah, absolutely. I first got totally turned on when I saw Sting's movie, The Heart of the, not Sting's movie, The Heart of, they did, what was the name of the movie? It was with Branford and Kenny Kirkland and all those guys. And he basically brought the band to like a castle and they like lived there and rehearsed there. And then they recorded there. And I can't remember the name, but I always was like, man, that's the way to do it. Cause like you get everybody like grooving together organically and you're living together. And then, the music comes out of it. So for the last few records, I've had everybody come to my house. And, if I'm using Euro guys or people from wherever, they're crashing there. And, we're rehearsing in the house for a few days. And then we go to the studio. It's like, it's sort of like really taking care of pre-production, so that when you go there, it's not about like, what do I play? It's more about having a good day or a bad day. And the whole thing about the jazz and the ska is that the element of it that I think is so awesome is that moment where you're just making the music, looking in the other player's eyes and just listening and just vibing. So that's why I don't like to overdub as much. It's like, if you can catch the magic, that to me is really what makes it special.
And solos are included in this conversation too, right? Like horn solos, prefer to have them performed with the band.
Preferred, exactly, because you're like vibing with the band, you're grooving with the band, you're inspired by the band. And music isn't supposed to be perfect, I mean, that isn't to say we don't do any overdubs, but if you do a take and the vibe is there, but you like squeak one note, maybe I'd be like, it's the coolest thing, because when music gets too perfect, it gets like antiseptic. It doesn't vibe. It's got to have the human element.
What about the most recent record, In the Moment? That one seems a little different to me overall. Can you talk a little bit about the recording of that and sort of your approach to this record?
Well, it was a COVID record. I like everybody else, I was kind of locked away and I had a lot of time to compose and really delve into these songs. And it was like more about what we were experiencing personally and kind of writing about it. And some of the shit was really heavy because there was a shooting in the supermarket right near here. And, some crazy ass shit went down. And, obviously COVID was a really difficult period. So, it was on the other hand, it was nice to have that much time to really focus on the compositions and kind of mold and remold. I definitely came back to it a few times. I thought I had something and then I would redo it a little bit. And so, but the pre-production was the same thing. I wrote a lot of them and then I got everybody together and, we just vibed and rehearsed for a few days before we went to the studio. We go to this place called Kaleidoscope in New Jersey, and just a great studio, and you could see everyone while you're recording, and just really nice to be able to do it and keep churning them out, man. It was number 15.
Are there any that you look back on and you forget that you recorded them?
No, not at all. And the fun thing is, I still like to listen to them, and I've had so many different permutations in the band that a lot of the records have a different personality because they're different players. Yeah. So the band went through a lot of evolutions, but I kind of dig them all. So that I'm happy about. That I'm really happy about because I'm not like, oh damn, how could I put that one out?
Yeah.
Is the evolution of the band largely dictated by the changing lineup, or is it more about where you're at?
That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like my drummer Yao Dinazulu once said to me, he said, Freddie, as long as you're in a band, remember one thing, it will change. So, yeah. it got me used to the idea, everybody brings something to the table and, they all make it special, but, each one is different. So, depending upon who's in at the time, it's going to, affect what it's like. But I suppose also, since I'm sort of like the main person that they're vibing off of, then, I got to groove with each one of these people. So, I mean, they have to groove with the whole band, of course, but in particular, they got to groove with me. So,
yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of give and take, especially the type of music you're playing and the way you do it.
Yeah, it's hard to find players that are really versed in the ska and the jazz in the way that I really like to play it, and that kind of have this. I really have this rock and roll mentality when we're on the stage. So, it's hard to find those kind of people, and when I find them, I want to keep them, and then when I have them, I don't want them to leave. But all kinds of things happen in life, so it's just the way it goes.
So, getting into your early history, you went to East Meadow High School in New York, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you study jazz in high school?
I did. There was the great music department there. We had a couple of jazz bands. There was a guy named Bill Katz. He was an incredible educator. Mike Carubia, Rod Tibbetts, all these real good musicians. And quite a few good musicians have come out of the school. This guy named Tommy Breckline, who was playing with Chick Corea and played with everybody. And one of my first teachers, Steve Greenfield, he used to play with Kool and the Gang and Deodata and all kinds of people. So, it was it was a pretty fertile high school to come out of, a lot of great musicians.
Was saxophone your primary instrument in high school?
I started out as a clarinet player early on, and probably didn't start the sax until 7th or 8th grade. But, once I and then I picked up the flute maybe around 8th or 9th grade. But then the sax kind of just really became like my voice by like 10th, 11th grade. That was the one I really enjoyed playing.
You didn't see a lot of future in playing the clarinet?
I used to study with this guy, Eddie Daniels, who's a saxophonist, also flautist, but like master clarinet player. And, it's certainly got its spots. I still play the clarinet. I've had some students and stuff. It's definitely not my main axe, but I like the voice. It in like the really old school jazzy stuff.
Yeah.
It's really nice to hear it. It's nice to hear it.
Yeah, but that clarinet to saxophone player pipeline is real. I mean, I feel like that's a common trope. Start on the clarinet and end up on the saxophone.
Well, I mean, there's just no comparison in terms of modern music that the saxophone has.
Sure.
A much, a freer voice, a rockier voice, a jazzier voice. I mean, all these kind of things. So,
it's cooler. It's cooler.
The sax players get the chicks, bro.
Hey, clarinets used to be cool though, a long time ago.
Hey, so did harpsichords, but
That's funny. Yeah.
I remember because I was in high school. I was in band in junior high and then early high school. I played drums, and like a clarinet section in like a junior high band can be, oh my God, it can be pretty punishing.
Yeah, well, intonation, but I think the strings have it worse.
Definitely.
You'd be listening to some like big band stuff, and there's like a clarinet section. Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a great voice. I mean, there's no doubt. It's like everything has its place, and if done, properly and with like poise, the shit's gonna kill it.
Oh,
so
for sure. Yeah.
No, so you studied the flute, the classical flute in college?
I didn't really study it. I mean, I studied it in college. I didn't formally study it, but I was like, studying with like, I was really, at that point I was playing with Stanley Jordan, the guitarist, and I was considering like, oh, do I want to try to be in a symphony? And so I was, studying with a guy from the New York Philharmonic. I took a lesson with Julius Baker, and I was really deep into the classical, but it was just like too much. It really wasn't my calling. I really love to improvise. So, that ultimately took over.
And so you were like a freelance musician for a while, right? Like after college, did you primarily think of yourself as a jazz player, or did you have a different way you looked at it?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I was around New York, and it was like I had just stopped playing with Stanley, and I was back, and it was like, all right, I gotta, make my career and all this stuff. And I would go to these jazz jams and stuff, and it just was like sort of a turnoff, to be honest with you. It felt like a lot of these cats had this attitude, like if you don't play jazz, you're inferior. And, that's not the way I felt about it. And I was really digging on all kinds of music. And, I would go to a rock jam, and like they'd be playing a Stones song, and like a sax player would come up and play bebop. And I'd be like, yo, man, you got to respect the genre. Like each genre in particular has its own like aesthetic, and you got to like dig it. You know what I mean? Like a rock sax player versus a pop or whatever. And so, the jazz scene in New York at that time was kind of like turning me off. And that's why the ska, when I found the ska, I really was happy. I was at that point like playing blues, playing original bands, doing whatever I could to make money, playing weddings, whatever. I was playing a lot of piano too. I used to play dance classes just to, get some more bread on piano.
Did it start with you with the New York Citizens? Was that your first ska gig?
That was my first ska gig. Yeah.
So what happened? Did you did they have an ad or something? How did you get connected with them?
I was connected with another band I was playing with out in Long Island called the Underdogs, and the bass player had a friend named Dave Mullen. Dave Mullen is a great saxophone player in New York now. He's like goes to New Orleans a lot. He's got all kinds of stuff going. Anyway, he was playing with them and he couldn't do the gig. And he was like, he knew I was itching to like get on the road. And he said, you want to sub? And I was like, absolutely. When the band heard about, him not being able to do it, they didn't want the sub because they figured, a guy can't just come in and, do the gig. So I did my homework and I like really learned their shit. I made a little cheap, Jeep sheet, whatever. And on the gig, they ended up letting me do the gig and I rocked the gig. So, and we might have been opening up for the Toasters on that gig. So that's how I met Bucket. And that started the connection there. So, so that's how I started with the New York Citizens. It was cool. And then I started doing, gigs when Dave couldn't do it. And eventually either from that first gig with the Toasters or, one of the others, they were friends with him and they said, look, Freddie really wants to get on the road. And that's how I eventually hooked up with him.
How long do you think you played with New York Citizens before you were in the Toasters?
Oh, man. I don't know. Maybe not that long, really. 6 months, a year.
Okay. So your Toasters, I think, starts in 1992.
Yeah, man. You got your facts right. Very good.
I want to see. Let's see. I know you played on New York Fever, right?
I played on New York Fever. You want to hear the crazy thing? I played a piano on a track of New York Fever.
Oh, which song?
Really?
Yeah. I'd have to look on the record. I don't remember which one, but yeah, I play on New York Fever. I played on Dub 56. I played on Weekend in LA. I played on Don't Let the Bastards Grind You Down. I played on Hard Band for Dead. And then I played on a bunch of other kind of, there was like Christmas scars and all different kinds of compilations.
Well, we'll get into this in a little bit, but you formed the New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble during this time. Did you come and go with the Toasters, or were you sort of always in the Toasters during this period and you were also doing your own band?
Well, what was crazy too, dude, was that I was also starting to play with the Scofflaws a lot at this point. So I was definitely a ska horn player because between the three bands, I was working like at least 5 nights, 6 nights a week. It was awesome. But I mean, it was a diplomatic thing. I just started the band and, Rick and I kind of didn't even really at first think we were going to play live. We just knew that since Buck had the label, we could probably get the record out. And then when we got that first show, we played at the Manhattan Center with the Scatolites and a bunch of other bands. Our first show, we played for 1,500 people. I just got the bug and it became my raison d'etre, if it will. And I really took it as it became, my band that I really, wanted to keep going and going. But of course, we had to be cool. There were tours. You had to say you were going or not going. So mostly it was like, probably at the beginning, I tried to go in and out of Toasters tours. And then eventually, I'd get too good a gig and it would overlap. And, it'd be like, sorry, I can't do the next one. And then it got a little weird. But, that's just the way it goes sometimes in bands. I have to deal with the same shit as a band leader where somebody gets a high paying gig and they can't go. And, it's just kind of comes with the territory, fortunately or unfortunately. So.
Do you prefer to be the band leader over the player?
Great question. I mean, I've been the band leader for a long time. So, I mean, on one level, I'm spoiled because it's kind of like I'm king in a way, at least in my little world, But then on the other hand, it's just such a pain in the ass to always have to worry about all the shit. And you're always trying to take care of everyone and you always want everyone to be happy. It's so much easier to just show up with my horn and play. So, it's a 50-50 because on the other hand, when I'm in front of like 5,000 or 10,000 people and they're singing like my songs, whether it's a vocal or an instrumental, like sometimes they'll sing Take 5 or whatever they'll sing. It's like, damn, I never thought I would have gotten to this point, and I'm very thankful. So, in those moments, I'm glad I'm the band leader. But right now, where I got to worry about plane tickets and this and all that, and even if you have managers and stuff, it's still a lot rides where you have to kind of make sure everything works. And I've been doing it so long, I got to say I'm a little tired of that. But, if you want to play, you got to deal with certain things.
Can you describe what Toasters were like when you joined? Because the Toasters is a band that has like gone through a lot of people, and their identity, their personalities shifts along with the lineup. And I think there's points where the Toasters are on fire, amazing band. There's points where they're kind of not. They're kind of not right there yet. I kind of view the Toasters in that light. Like it's a roller coaster. Their history. What was the Toasters when you joined like?
I mean, it was definitely edgy. It was definitely like they had lost some, guys. That was right after apparently Lionel and the other guy had gotten some sort of record deal and left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Unity 2. Yes.
Right. Unity 2 had just left, so they were a little pissed about that. It had the edge. It was like Buck and Matt, and I'm trying to remember who the drummer was. And then it was Sledge and me, and it was like what I'm always really kind of like psyched about and really feel good is that I joined in 92, and to be honest with you, it just kept going up and up and up until I left in around 99, 2000. And the other thing that I also think was really cool in my tenure was that eventually Sledge and I picked Rick to join us, Rick Faulkner on trombone, and then the three of us were in the band together for about 6.5 years. So that horn section really solidified and got very tight and kicked ass. And so, at least in my time, the band kept getting better and better. There were changes in the chatters, but the basic rhythm section was probably when Jonathan McCain came back. He was the original drummer. It was on fire, man. It was really good.
So Cooley Ranks came in at some point after you joined, right? I think he might have been in before and then left.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly. I came in first. There was Cashew, there was Pablo D, there was Jack Ruby, and there was Cooley.
Yeah. What was it like playing with Cooley?
Cooley was a great front man. Really took it. He's like a very dynamic cat. He's the only guy who's ever bumped into me on stage. So I have to watch him because he's wild out there. So, because it started getting crazy on those shows that they would like let so many people on the stage and it would be like mayhem. 30 people would get on the stage. And after I got hit the first time, I was like, I'm going to go to the back. I can't take a chance with this shit. But Cooley's a great front man.
I want to say I saw Toasters. First time I saw Toasters was probably when they were touring New York Fever. So obviously you were in the band at that point.
Yeah.
It was amazing. The band was on fire. So tight, so much energy.
I tell people like Buck used to say, if you're not playing, you should be running. It was like, it's just like, it was like this avalanche of energy,
Yeah. I just dug up a review that was written in 94. I'm just going to see if you remember anything about this. Probably not. It was 1994. You guys played at Zephyr Club in Salt Lake City.
Sure. I remember.
ME330 opened.
Okay.
And the reviewer said that during your set, there was some random hecklers during the audience, during your set. No? Do you remember anything about that show?
I mean, I remember being in Salt Lake City. I remember being there. I don't remember the hecklers. I probably would typically want to like just, not remember them and just make the least of it just because, when Pauline Black, oh yeah, that was the band. Pauline Black was in New York playing at Tramps and people started breaking out and it was like, she got in the mic. She's like, this is our show. You're not supposed to be doing that.
So you mentioned it before, the Ska Vuvi tour. That's the tour in 1994. Scotalites, the Selector, and Toasters, and then there was various opening acts, I think, right?
Well, no, I think 93 was Toasters, Scatolites, Special Beat, and Pauline's band.
Yeah.
And Selector. 94, I think, was Toasters, Pie Tasters, Scofflaws.
Okay, so 93, that's the one I'm thinking of, the first Ska Vuvi tour.
Right.
This is an important tour in terms of like the kind of crowds that ska is bringing to US markets. What do you remember about that? It was pretty packed rooms, generally speaking.
Generally speaking, it was very good. The bands were really good, and it was great to be playing with like other good bands. Makes each other play better. Yeah, I mean, I think it was mostly white kids. It wasn't really a mixed racial audience, but I definitely remember it being, for me, it was so much fun. I was hanging out with Tommy and Roland. We were on the bus, and it was really just great to be playing every night and getting to hear them play every night.
Was that your first time meeting them, or had you already gotten to know them? Because I know they were living in New York, right?
Yeah, I mean, we probably did a few one-offs, but being on the bus with them, I mean, then we really got to be buddies. Tommy and Roland used to call me their little white brother, so that was kind of fun. It was really fun, and Lester was there, and it was, you know, and it was just great. It was just great. Both Lloydies, Nib and Brevet were there, and it really was like it took me a while to be able to understand the patois because it was me not going to leave the bus.
I've heard you say before that they kind of like stole the show every night.
I mean, they were great. Yeah, they did because Roland could hardly like walk. He had like polio in one hand, and you'd see this old little guy, but then he'd get up on the stage and it was like a lion. Especially for me as a sax player. These guys playing instrumental music, bringing me to Jamaica every night. I mean, all the bands were great, but they were very special.
The influence for you starting the New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble was because, in part, of how well they did and how well they were received.
Exactly. And then we were like, we can do this, but of course we want to do it with our own flavor and our own stuff, because we're not old Jamaican cats. We're like young dudes from New York. So, we got to give it a different vibe.
So before you start this project, so you're in the Toasters, you're playing with Scofflaws. How did you think of yourself? Did you think of yourself as a jazz musician? And did that conflict at all with playing with musicians in these bands who had no jazz training?
Wow, man, that's funny. I mean, I never really think of myself so much as a jazz musician because I'm so influenced by like rock and pop and like all forms. I obviously love jazz, but I love them all. And I never was one of these like jazz guys. So there were moments where like if we were on tour with some of these punk bands and the volume was just so loud and it didn't really seem like they were dealing with harmony, that at times could be a little frustrating. But what I kind of grew to learn and understand that like all these genres, in the genre there's going to be a couple that do it really well. So it might not be your thing, but if you listen to enough of them, you can distinguish who can really play well. And with regard to like playing with players that maybe weren't schooled or what, I mean, it was a learning curve for me too, because like I was always used to like musical form. And so like we'd be dealing with like a Chatter and like maybe Pablo or whoever, even Cooley, any one of them. And it'd be like, okay, you're not coming in after 4 measures. You're coming in after he says, yeah, man. And so it was like a very different kind of aesthetic for me. And at first I didn't like it, but then, everything makes you better and makes you a little more, hip to the whole thing. And, there are different things that make different things good. So, you got to be open-minded. You can't just think, oh, it's got to be, a minor 7th chord and you have to play the proper, blah, blah, blah. Because in the end, there are musicians that don't even know anything about harmony. They just use their ears and their gut, and they're fucking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, earlier you were basically saying that you disliked the jazz elitism sort of vibe. So I can see, I mean, if you already were turned off to that, it probably wouldn't be difficult to play with a variety of musicians who are coming from a different place.
Exactly. And plus, I really love pop and rock music, and you listen to some of them and they're like, a lot of them are deep, man. They have great harmonies and incredible voices and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, um, uh, it doesn't have to be complicated to be good.
And I think that one of the problems with any kind of elitism in music is that it becomes way too insular and too self-referential, and like there's little room to grow because there's too much concern about form and like rules, I think.
Agreed, man. Agreed. Agreed. I think it's probably different now, but at that time in particular, I was like, this is not my bag. So it was great that I found the ska.
Hmm. So walk us through the first New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble record. We've already established it's a side project. It's it's a recording project essentially.
Right. Right.
So you and Rick Faulkner are the originators of this concept, right?
Correct. Correct. We're the leaders. We're the ones that said, hey, why don't we do it? Let's put together our quote unquote super band, just invite all these guys from these different bands, the best guys that can play ska and jazz. And pretty much all the first call guys we called all said, yeah, we're down. Let's do it. So we found this studio in Jersey City. It was actually Lenny Kravitz's old studio. And he had all the old tube amps, and like he had one of the Beatle boards, and it was just this incredible studio. And we did it kind of the way we, do it, still, where the rhythm section recorded live, the horns are in a booth, and you keep what you can.
Who were some of the players on that first record? Your dream players, if you will, that you enlisted to be in this recording project?
Right. Well, we had Jonathan McCain, who was our drummer from the Toasters. And then we had Victor Rice, who was playing bass with the Scofflaws. And then we had Carrie Brown on keyboards, and he was playing with the Scatolites and the Scofflaws. He was actually the musical director of the Scatolites. And then you had Devon James, who was the guitarist of the Scatolites at the time. So we kind of really, interspersed the three bands.
You covered a few jazz songs. Let's talk about those first, and then we'll talk about the originals. Thelonious Monk, I Mean You, and Charles Mingus, Haitian Fight Song. Can you talk about why you chose these songs?
Well, I mean, I think Rick probably brought them. He might have, because he really had a deep jazz influence. I mean, it was all about like what we thought would go cool and work over the ska beat. Mm-hmm. So, these two definitely work. In fact, I've been playing Haitian on my recent gigs and people still ask for it. It's just, it's really interesting with the round, the horns going up against each other. And, the harmony is pretty basic. It stays in one key for the most part, although when we solo, we kind of go to some minor blues thing. But it's really a chance for each band member to kind of stretch out. And it just kind of seems to really get that intoxicating ska beat. Like, once you really get in that vibe, people kind of get lost in it, and you can just, solo away, and everybody's just dancing crazy. And same thing with I Mean You too. We do that one pretty fast. It's definitely more on the hyper ska vibe.
Yeah, the Haitian Fight Song is really fast.
Yeah.
That one seems like a level of fast that would be difficult to play.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, so our first drummer was Jonathan McCain, and he was coming out of the Toasters' head, and their attitude was like, well, if you got an audience, if there's a choice between slowing down or speeding up, speed up, hype them out. So, and so that was my influence, and I liked it. And I also kind of had this punk vibe for whatever reason growing up the way I did. And so like it really lent itself to some of the songs that I wrote, like Nasty by Nature and Arachnid, like these really hyper skank real fast. And I used to tell the new drummers, just play it as fast as you could play it without slowing down. Like just basically it can't be too fast, because I love the hype. Now, when I got my new drummer, Yaudin Zulu, around 2000, the thing that made him so awesome was he showed me that not only can you rock the crowd by hyping them, but you could also rock the crowd by just grooving them real steady. And so then he brought this element of like, okay, I love hyping out the crowd, but then it's really nice to pull it back. And then the hype has a more distinction. You don't want to do everything crazy like that. So that was sort of interesting with the tempos. But yeah, man, I like playing that one fast.
Did you and Rick like compose songs for this? How did that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the beginning, it was like kind of like he and I were co-producing it. So we were probably the main writers. We definitely wanted the other guys to have their voices heard. They were, Victor writes, Carrie writes. So we thought it would be interesting to have their songs. So I think they both wrote on the first record as well. And typically, it's kind of been a thing where the composer kind of has a vision, kind of writes it out, brings it in, and then the band molds it. But the composer typically kind of had, the harmony, the bass line, or a lot of it before he brings it to the band.
Were you a songwriter already before you started this project?
Yeah, I used to do like in my early days when I was playing with Stanley, I came out of that. I used to do some, I produced a few, little record things, and I was writing on those. They were more like I wouldn't say fusiony funk, but it had that element to it.
So this was a little new then. The whole thing was a little new for you.
Absolutely.
Was it hard, or was it like just a kind of a fun challenge? Maybe it felt low key since it was just a recording project.
I mean, I'm kind of like, no, actually, that's not me. Unfortunately, I wish it were, but I'm kind of pretty intense person. And like after we did that first gig and got the response we did, I became Rocksteady Freddie of the New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble. And I was like kind of selling the band, trying to book the band, making the band happen. At that point, I really became the driving force of getting the band a lot of work. And, that's the key to having a band, to be quite honest with you. So, and I just loved, being kind of up there in the front. It became eventually I became the real front man of the band. And, so it was always a lot of fun. I think, what drove me was that I just enjoyed being on the stage with my band, playing that music. It was always like, I felt like the players were great. I loved the songs. I got off on the music. People were dancing, shows were getting bigger. We were playing in more cities, more places. I was able to get the first Euro tour in 96. That went really well. We were the first band to play in Poland after the wall came down. And, as we're driving into Poland, we turn on the radio and it's a version of us playing Harlem Nocturne. It was like lucky timing, and I don't know, luck, or, we were working hard. I mean, I'd been at it for a long time, and, just, good to put a lot of really good, talented people around me, for sure.
That show in Poland, first band to play after the wall comes down. Can you remember what their reception to your performance was like?
It's always like great, because like they're so starved for entertainment, and we're of course very different. We're a horn band from New York, we're kicking ass. So they're loving it. They're getting super drunk and everybody's really partying. There's like no real bathroom. I mean, it's just kind of mayhem craziness. It's probably like we played outside. It was like too cold to really play. So we're like out of tune, but nobody really cares. So, it sort of was, as a horn player, it was like frustrating when it gets too cold. You can't really play it properly. But at the same time, you're like, holy shit, we're in Poland. We're playing for like 400 or 500 people and they're loving it. So, I'm not going to fight that.
You called the band New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble. That was Bucket's idea, right? The New York part of it?
Yeah, that was his idea. He was like, the record label's doing really well. It's really, people associate, coolness and all this vibe with New York. So I recommend keeping New York in the name. So I was like, okay. And then I came up, with the rest.
Did you come up with the term ska jazz when you were trying to think of a name for the band, or were you already thinking about that term as your genre?
No, that's when I came up with it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's good. I like that it's sort of like simple in a way. It's not a cute, bizarre name, but it tells you exactly what to expect.
Well, that's the funniest thing. Like, I'll go on interviews and they'll be like, "What kind of music do you play?" It's like, okay, bro, I'll break it down for you.
But that must have worked well too for marketing the band, for building yourself up as a touring act.
There was a lot in our favor. I was at the beginning, I was like kind of billing it as a super band made from members of the Toasters and the Skatalites and the Scofflaws. And, that definitely helped, put us up there. But then eventually it became like, we don't want to be known by that anymore. We want to be our own thing. And, we don't want to, we want to stand on our own feet. So eventually that, of course, happened. And, just like growing pains, but it definitely helped boost us off the ground. We didn't start at the bottom. We definitely got a couple of rungs up, and a lot of people knew me, from touring with the Toasters. So I made a lot of friends all along the way, and I was able to kind of, connect in that way.
Was it record sales that led to you playing your first show, the one you mentioned, where it was opening for Scotalites in front of 8 to 1,500 people?
I think it just was like we were working on the record. We started in the end of '94, and then a show came up, and I don't remember exactly, but it was like, yeah, let's get on it. They heard about us, and I don't know how. I mean, everybody was sort of interconnected, and everyone knew it was going down, and we were working on the record, and somehow we got offered the show, and of course we took it. And then once we did that live show, then I was sold. Then I was like, you know what? This is really what I want to do. So, it really became my like driving force for pretty much the rest of my life, which is kind of insane, but that's kind of the way I am.
That's interesting because you hadn't even really considered it to be a full-time project until this show.
Exactly. Yeah.
Must have been a good show.
It was awesome, bro. It was so much fun, I mean, the other thing too is you got to understand, as much as I love playing with the Toasters, and in fact, I just played with them a couple months ago here in Denver. I played with them, and the role in the band, there was a lot of playing, but with the ska jazz, we were really getting to play out a lot and really play more. So as a saxophone player, it was so much fun to be in a more instrumental band at the time.
So this first tour you did. Now, I was reading that it was the singer for the Busters, the German ska band, who kind of helped hook you up with some of these shows.
Yeah, that was Thomas Schultz. He had like a booking agency. He was booking the Toasters, and then he helped book, and then he booked us. So yeah, he booked that first tour. That's right. It was like, what was it, like 13 shows, 12 in Germany and 1 in Poland. And, and then from that tour, I was able to get like Italy and Switzerland. And then, like each tour, we'd pick up more countries.
So what do you know the tally? I read somewhere 37 countries you've played. Is that the correct tally of countries?
That is correct tally to this point. Correct.
Are you looking to tax them on pretty soon here?
What I feel really bad about is that I got offered to play in Tunisia, and we haven't played in Africa yet. And, there's the famous jazz song night in Tunisia. And I've always thought, man, if I could bring the band to Africa now, that would be something. And I would really love to. And I got the gig. And then 3 or 4 months before we were going to go, there was that shooting on the beach. And the government said, don't go. And if you go, keep a low profile. And then my friends and my family, everyone's like, just don't go, bro. Don't go. So that was one of the first times I turned something down. But I'm always looking to play in more places. We haven't been to Australia. Surprisingly, we haven't played in Argentina. We were supposed to, and then something fell through. But in the end, I want to play for as many people as we can, wherever they are.
You've toured Europe 70 times at this point?
Yeah, it's been a lot. It's been a lot, and in fact, we're going in August again.
So, are you bigger? Are you biggest in Europe? than anywhere else?
I'd say probably biggest in Mexico. We play like really big shows there. We played at the Sports Palace the last time. It was like 10 to 20,000. So,
Wow.
I mean, it was a ska fest with a bunch of other bands, but we're held in high esteem there, and we're supposed to go back there in October. And then we have other places where we've done really well. It goes up and down. I was thinking about it. We played for 10,000 in Prague back in the day. We played for like 9 or 10,000 in Tokyo. I mean, but I would say, yeah, our main fan base is probably Europe.
Is there something about their understanding of jazz and ska? Do you know what it is about Europe?
I think part of it is that, things are changing, but I used to say that, in America, they're a little bit more worried about like image and, sex appeal. And not that I am very sexy, of course, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Okay, so let me understand. So, but whereas in Europe, like they don't care what you look like. If you throw down, they don't care how old you are. If you throw down, they're going to give it up to you. So I think there's a little bit, maybe more of that. Obviously, coming from New York, that helps. They always like you more from places where you're not, not from where you're from, I think. And I don't know. I mean, I hope to think that the ska jazz, since we really, take our instruments very seriously, they're not used to hearing maybe that level, and it really inspires them. I don't know. I mean, I'm feeling pretty confident everywhere now. We've been at it a long time, so I feel like we play at a pretty good level. So no matter where we play, people are going to recognize, not in any ego way, but more like these are like men who dedicated their lives to playing music. There aren't that many that do that. You know what I mean?
So how often do you tour the U.S. then?
Well, we haven't toured the U.S. in a while. The last thing I've done is just some New York gigs. We did some really nice gigs in New York recently. We played at the Iridium, which is this awesome jazz club on Broadway. We had our names up and lights in Broadway. That was really exciting. And then we played at the City Winery, which is another really major venue there. And, the next real big thing is this Euro tour in August.
You guys formed when ska was very popular in the U.S.
Yep.
What was it like when ska became unpopular in the U.S.? How did that impact your band? I mean, because it's so different.
Well, that's part of the reason I went to Europe, because, I used to have this thing like, I'm not going to pay them any less than that. And if I can't pay them that, we're not going to play. So then we would take fewer gigs. And then before you know it, there's nothing. So it was like, I kind of put my eggs in a Euro basket at that point. And I was like, all right, I'm going to really try to build it over there, because the scene here in the States has kind of imploded. So, it was definitely tough. It used to be, in the early days of the Toasters in the 90s, late 90s. I mean, it was so booming, and we'd be playing in New York at Wetlands for 800 people, just a local gig, and it was so much fun, and people were going nuts, and it was just really great to be a part of it. But, I guess everything has its time. And so, for me at that point, I started thinking of it more as a world market. And I was like, all right, well, we just got to play somewhere where they're going to like us. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it seems like you found a market in Europe where you could play consistently and it would be a beneficial place.
Right, exactly. So why not do it? I used to go 2 to 4 times a year. There was one year I think I went 7 times. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you playing mostly festivals? Were you headlining? What's the path you built there?
Well, I mean, when we're playing clubs, we're typically the headliner, and when we're playing festivals, we're sometimes the headliner, but depends on how big the festival is. Like we're playing Reggae Jam in Bersenbrook in August, and that's like with, like all the titans of the reggae world. So, we won't be the headliner. So it's all good. I mean, I'm just happy to be there. we've done all different kinds of stuff in terms of like building it. And through the years, different places have been more beneficial than others. For a while, we had our booking agent in Rennes, so we used to play in France all the time. Since we have different agent, we don't play there as much. It's like they're like different waves. I used to say, like, you just got to find the wave and surf it. Like somewhere in the world, the ska is really pumping. So you just got to go there when it's like that. In the end, you got to build real fans and build a real fan base. So, I think in Spain and Italy and all over Europe, we've kind of done that. We've really trademarked the name. So they've come, I'll have, like, on the last tour, I'll have someone come. They're like, yo, dude, I saw you 20 years ago. I'm like, bro, that's awesome, but please don't wait another 20.
When you're playing these shows, when you're playing these festivals, are the bands, the audiences, is it more geared towards, traditional ska, jazz? Do you know where you kind of fit in these markets?
I mean, I think it really, as you well know from going to some of these things, they all have their own sort of personalities and characters. I'm sure Reggae Jam is more of a reggae-based kind of festival, so I might not do as much of the hyper ska. If we were in a club and it were like an older crowd, I might go more jazz and slow it down. It really all depends. And then, even going against that, in the end, people just like, they want you to do what you do. So you just do what you do. It's just music. And so either they dig it or they don't. And so, you could try to label it and, because like we're bringing in these days a lot, we're bringing in funk and pop and rock and, all this stuff through the set. And so, people that dig music are going to kind of find something to groove on. If I see that it's like, like in Italy and Spain, the younger kids definitely want to mosh it up. They want to go more hard. So then I might throw in some of the faster ones because I know that's really what I perceive they want. I think it is, and so I think, I typically will write a set, but, if I really feel like the audience isn't vibing a certain way, I might audible it and just change it up right on the stage.
I was reading that your 2008 record, Step Forward, was your bestseller.
Mm.
Is that true?
I don't have numbers, but yeah, it always seems to be the bestseller. Take 5 is kind of like our signature song around the world. A lot of people know that one.
Is there any reason behind why this album sort of took off? I mean, maybe it's that song. Were you guys super active at that time?
I mean, I had a Spanish producer do it. So maybe he had a different color on it. I don't know. I don't really know. I mean, I love all the records. So, for me, it's like, they're all labor of love and there's really great stuff in all of them. I mean, I think like on the show, the one thing that might help sell that record is like we typically always play that song in the set, and it's like a really good song for me to stretch out, for the guitar player to stretch out. Now I do this back and forth thing with the drummer. So I think it really kind of like highlights a lot of like what it is that makes the ska jazz. And, we get to really like burn and really, kill it on that song. So I think just in general from the live shows, people are like, oh, what is that one? I want that record. That's what happens,
Did that song and the record get publicity, or was it just like from the show that it really became a favorite?
I think from the show, really. I mean, we've had a lot of publicity through the years, all kinds of magazines and radios and some television and stuff. But I think, no, it's just more like people love that song. It's like such an old classic, and older people, of course, know it via Dave Brubeck. And, some of the purists might not dig it because they're like, it's in 5. How could they do it in 4? But then, other people are like, oh, it's a cool rendition, and they vibe and they can dance to it. So, it's just, and I used to play that one back in the day in college with Stanley. So I've been playing that song for a long time.
Yeah. Could you speak on how you, took Take Five and turned it into a New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble piece?
I mean, it was sort of, I was playing with this guitar player, Lee, and we were playing Take Five, and it became a reggae vibe. We felt the reggae in the song, and it was just like the horns and the way we reharmonized it. It became, it just worked. I don't know what to say. It's just, we started playing it, and it just felt right. It vibed. The audience vibe with us. It was always really fun to play. I do this back and forth thing with the drummer, so that was really fun because we're trying to kind of talk musically back and forth. I think that's very, it's kind of fun. It's interesting, I think.
You've obviously traveled the world many, many times. Then COVID hit, and you were unable to tour for a while. You had before COVID, didn't you have a Christmas ritual that you would do?
Yeah, we were always in Europe. We were always in Italy. It was, we call it Spaghetti Christmas, and we would always do a big Christmas tour. So yeah, that kind of had to get canceled a couple of times.
So you always celebrated Christmas in Italy?
Yeah.
Did you do anything specific for Christmas with you and the band?
Well, what's been really fun recently, and I don't know if it's always been the case, but we've been playing with this guitar player, Simone Amadeo, and he's from Genoa. And so he's been the guitarist in Europe now for a number of years. And so his family graciously would invite us to their house. And so we kind of would always go to his house and have a Christmas dinner before the gig.
Oh.
So it was really fun. We'd have the panettone afterward and the classic classic Italian dinner with these lovely people. It made you less lonely that you weren't with your family.
That's interesting. So after a number of years, I mean, this is just what Christmas becomes to you.
Yeah, because what I always used to tell my daughter when I wasn't around would be like, look, I'm sorry I'm not around for certain things, but we'll just do it on our own time. And so we can make any day special. I'll be around, in certain ways I was around more because, when I'm not on tour, sometimes I had more time for her. So, sometimes it sucked, but, I'll tell you, I used to always do New Year's over there. And after doing it 10, 15 years, I was like, man, I'm tired of working on New Year's. I'm just going to stay back and hang with my friends. I did it one year. And even though it was cool, it wasn't that cool. It was kind of like, oh, man. I'd rather be out there playing, making some money, and then I'll chill 3 nights later. What do I care?
Did you have a specific place you played every New Year's, or did that change?
It changed. It was usually Italy or Spain, or I think we did Switzerland. Once we kind of had that routine of coming, it was always like telling the agents, we'll be there. Somebody find me New Year's, that kind of thing.
So what was it like? Christmas 2020 you couldn't go to Italy to have your Christmas dinner?
Spaghetti Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, it was COVID sucked for everybody. I think it particularly sucked for musicians. We couldn't really, I think what the world and society learned from COVID was that we need culture in our lives. Otherwise it's a little boring. If you can't get some other elements and influences in your life and you just have to stay in your house all the time, we're social creatures. So, it was hard. And, I probably drank more than I should have that night and hung out with my wife and it was cool. But, I had canceled I don't know, man, the first tour, we probably canceled 40 shows. And then, we tried again during COVID and we had to cancel again. And, I probably canceled 70, 80 shows. And so, after a while, it just kind of got like, this sucks. And I got to wait until I can really do it. So, like everyone else, what could we do? We had no choice. So you just had to grin and bear it. But, it sucked. And what really sucked more is that a lot of those venues, well, not a lot. Some of them just closed up and now, they're not around anymore. So,
Yeah. Were you able to do Spaghetti Christmas last year?
No, I kind of got out of the thing. It's definitely, after doing it for so many years and then not doing it, the one thing is it just the thing for me as the one that runs the whole thing is that I have to do it like 4 to at least like 6 months out. So like if I'm doing it, the two of them, I'm like always on. And I gotta say that it was kind of nice chilling from it. And we'll see what happens this next go around. But I am excited. We got this, this August tour, and we got some very nice festival dates, and then we got a big show in Mexico in October. So I'll start figuring out the next move after that. We'll probably think about another record soon too.
So, like a lot of people, it's like you're like rebuilding your new rituals.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I mean, it's a different world. I don't know if you've, in communication with a lot of musicians. It's definitely, a different playing field. It seems a little harder, but at the same time, I want to be out there. So, you just got to keep going. So, but you kind of got to find, other ways to, we have some nice side projects going right now. My bass player, Mark, who plays with the Pretty Reckless, he's doing phenomenally well. He's been hooking us up. We've been doing these smooth jazz records. So I've been going to New York and doing some nice record dates and, thankfully, being able to pay the rent like that.
How is it playing smooth jazz compared to playing ska jazz?
You got to put like a harness on me, man. It's
hold him back.
It's a different aesthetic. I mean, I dig it, and I can be real pretty, and that's all. And it's give them what they want. It's all good. But when I play the ska jazz, I kind of take an aggressive stance. That's my nature.
Don't go anywhere. If you want to hear the rest of this conversation, head over to our Patreon. Thank you for listening to In Defense of Ska. Please rate and review this podcast and tell a friend. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at In Defense of Ska. Pick up Aaron's book, In Defense of Ska, at your local bookstore or online. This podcast is edited by Chris Reeves of Ska Punk International. This is your co-host, Adam Davis of Omnigone, leaving you by saying ska now more than ever. Hey, Aaron, how do you count 5-4?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I start again.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Probably 1, 2, and then 3.
Oh, okay.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I don't know if that's correct, but that's how I count it. How do you count 7?
We are jazz aficionados.
What about counting 7?
I'd say
there's an onomatopoeia for that. Oh no, this is so crazy. Oh no, this is so crazy.
Huh.
Right?
Yeah. That's cool. So I see you have been studying your jazz then.
Ever since we did the episode, trying to up my jazz chops. No.
We talked to Fred from the New York Jazz Ska Ensemble. We continued the conversation. There's a lot of stories with the band that we didn't get into, and one of them is that he scored music for TV and film and stuff, specifically the HBO documentary Redemption. So yeah,
did you watch Redemption?
It's been a while. How about you?
It's been a while.
Yeah. All right.
Who do we have next week, Aaron?
Okay. Sadie Dupuis from Speedy Ortiz and Sad 13.
Wow.
Pure
Didn't know there was a ska connection there, did you, listener?